Hello. Sorry that I'm late, but welcome, dog lovers, to Mary's Angels Dog Training Trainer Talk with Mary. Today, we are going to be discussing fireworks and other fears. This is Spartacus. He will be joining us today. Say hi, Spartacus. Hi, bud. All right. So, um, oh, hello. um, Thank you for joining. We're going to be discussing fireworks and other sound related fears. So, this can be true for any mammal, pretty much. And it's going to be, we're going to be discussing dogs, but this also pertains to cats and children and other things like that. So, there are a lot of loud and sudden sounds in life, and there are few that are as loud or sudden or continuous once they begin as fireworks. And we are approaching the 4th of July. Hold on, this is not sitting correctly. There we go. So the 4th of July, as we all know, even in places where it is illegal to have fireworks, like Marin County, where we are, um, there are people who do fireworks, and there's the fair that does fireworks, and those with all the hills around, they echo, and they echo for quite a distance. So even if somebody's just doing it with a little bit of firecrackers in their own backyard, everyone in the couple of neighborhoods will hear them. And so we want to prepare our dogs ahead of time. So you want to start now, well before the 4th of July. If you know your dog is sensitive to loud noises, and especially sudden loud noises, or if they've had a panic over fireworks in the past, it's really important to go to your vet now and do get some anti-anxiety medication. So, the anti anxiety medication very often will require a blood test just to make sure that your dog is healthy enough to be on an anti anxiety medication and that they don't have any problems with their kidneys or liver that might cause them to either be hypersensitive to the medication or not be able to adjust the medication or dispose of the medication from their bloodstream properly. So you want to keep that in mind, that it takes a little bit of time to get that medication. So check your stores now if you have, or check your storage now if you had previous medication. Check the expiration dates, and if you need new medication, start making that appointment now with your vet. Now, aside from medication, there's training that we can do. But before we get into the training, we need to get into the medical background. A lot of times, dogs that have noise sensitivities, they actually have chronic pain that we don't know about. What happens, especially joint pain or arthritis, what happens is the dog has this chronic pain that's low. It's a low level pain in their day-to-day life for the most part. You barely notice it. Maybe they limp or hobble a little bit occasionally. Maybe they just they lick their joints a lot, but or they are a little bit less active now than they used to be. Those can all be symptoms of this hidden low level pain. And then a loud noise happens and they jump, they startle, uh, they jolt. And that jolts their joints and sends a shooting pain through their body. And what this does is this shooting pain, then it gets associated with the sound. They don't realize that their startle response is what caused the pain. All they know is sound happened and then pain happened. So now they're afraid of the sound. And the next time the sound happens, they jolt and they react harder. They flinch harder, and the pain comes back more. And so it becomes this negative feedback loop of sound equals flinch equals pain equals harder flinch next time the sound happens. So we want to keep that in mind. And if your dog has suddenly developed a fear of loud sounds, it could be worth talking to your vet about trying them on a pain medication and see if there's a change in behavior that comes after the pain medication has started. So that's where we want to start before we start any training, is make sure that there's not a medical situation. Because if there's a medical situation going on, training can only do so much to counteract the medical situation. Hi, Spartacus. Thank you, buddy. Do you want to be held? Do you want to be held? Okay. He's just going to join us for the talk today. Yes, you're such a sweet boy. Anyway, so you want to keep in mind that as you are, as you're looking at training your dog, before you look at training, make sure there's not a medical condition that's underlying that behavior, because otherwise you're going to end up very frustrated with the training, not understanding why it's not making as much of an effort or an effect as you wanted it to. So once you've got your anti-anxiety medication, once you have checked your dog for underlying chronic pain, then we can start the training. What you want to do is you want to pair the sound with food. And you don't want to start with the sound as loud as real life. You want to start with a lower volume sound. YouTube is fantastic for this. Is you can look up videos of, oh, no, don't knock over the camera, please. Thank you, sir. Here, you can go over there. Good boy. Anyway, so you can start with the with YouTube videos of fireworks sounds. So with YouTube videos of fireworks sounds, what you want to do is you want to start at a very low volume where you can barely hear it. Remember that your dog's hearing is better than yours, and you want to make sure that you are doing it at a volume that is low enough that they barely react. And that is probably going to be a volume that is low enough that you can barely hear it. Now, if you know anything about Pavlov, Pavlov was a scientist who discovered that he was doing a study on dogs, and he discovered that every day he would ring a bell and then he would feed the dogs. And this was accidental. What he discovered was that the dogs started to salivate when he rang the bell, and that ringing became an indication that food was coming, and their bodies responded with salivation and positive emotional responses before the food was even present. And so that bell became what we called a secondary reinforcer. We want to do the same thing to our dogs with sounds like fireworks. However, you need to be careful, because if you do it the wrong way around, if you put the food first and then the sound, you will actually poison the food, because the food will predict the sound, which will then end up with your dog being terrified of their food and start to get nauseous when they hear fireworks or even when they see food. So you want to make sure that you have video recordings or sound recordings, audio recordings of fireworks played at a very low volume. You want to let the sound happen first and then immediately follow that with food. So it will go boom, food. Boom, boom, food. Boom, food. And you might need, if it's a long drawn out firework show, you might need to pause. It might need to go boom. You pause the video before the next boom can happen. You give food. You play the video again when your dog is finished eating, and it goes boom, boom. Pause. Feed your dog. When your dog is no longer having any response at all and is just standing there staring at you with their ears up, wagging their tail, standing there wagging their tail and ready for, oh, can you hear me? Let me see. Hello, hello? Hold on a moment. Hmm. Okay. Great. You can still hear me. Okay. I thought that my microphone got disconnected and I was trying to figure out how to fix it. Okay. Thank you. um, anyway, um, uh, what was I saying? The fireworks. So yes, when your dog is no longer reacting at all to the fireworks and is just standing there staring at you, then you can start to um, then you can start to raise the volume. So you end the session, the training session, and the next day you start with the volume 1 or 2 notches higher, and you get them accustomed to that sound. Boom, treat. Boom, pause the video, treat, etc. until your dog is ignoring the sounds again. And then you can the next day increase the volume a little bit higher. Usually these training sessions take 2 to 5 minutes. And if you can do that consistently, eventually you're going to be able to get to the point where you can play a Bluetooth speaker at max volume across the room and your dog isn't flinching anymore. However, that takes a long time and it takes consistent practice. Between now and July 4th, we very likely don't have enough time for most of your dogs that have sound sensitivities to go through all the way to being able to withstand real life fireworks sounds. So it's really good to start the training now, but please make sure that you get the anti-anxiety medication to give your dog on July 4th early so that you can then continue your training after July 4th and be ready in time for New Year's. All right. Anyone have any questions about fireworks or sounds or sound sensitivities in animals or dogs? I'll give a couple of moments for chat to catch up. And then we will start talking about another topic. All right. So the next topic that we will go over, let's go over uh, let's go over dogs that have mental illnesses real quick. So just like people, oh, great. Yeah, I'm glad. So the comment here is with Larks Perlisa, uh, Scaredy Rescue Aussie, who's sensitive to sounds and been using YouTube for sounds. Yeah, YouTube is great for sounds. YouTube is great for sounds. You can also, if you can get YouTube up onto your TV screen by either connecting your computer or using a Google, uh, uh, one of those Google Drive things that allows you to cast a Chromecast or something like that allows you to cast from your phone or something like that. And you can put the fireworks up on the TV. You can also work with the visual stimulus by having the firework video up on the TV muted and working with your dog with the sight of fireworks, as well as working with them with the sound of fireworks. So, yeah, I'm glad that that's been helpful for you. My next topic is going to be dogs with mental illnesses. And so training can help dogs a lot, but I also sort of relate dog training to therapy for dogs. And some of it can be exposure therapy, like we just talked about, exposing our dogs to sounds that then make them, uh, that then uh, teach them to not be afraid of those sounds or sights or whatever it is, using Pavlov's uh, idea of combining or pairing something with food. But we can also help them with several mental illnesses. Just like people, dogs can be subject to mental illnesses. Mental illnesses that have been proven to show up in dogs include um, OCD, and we believe that we have found autism in dogs. We believe we found something very similar to Down syndrome in dogs. And I believe we've also found something very similar to schizophrenia in dogs. And this is just what we've been able to prove so far. Obviously, there's not as much science behind it yet as a lot of human studies, but we've found some of these so far. And a lot of these can be helped to an extent with training, but they cannot necessarily be cured because it is genetic uh, a genetic way that their brain was formed that can never be fully cured. And so you want to keep that in mind if you have a dog that has or develops a mental illness, that a lot of the training strategies are management strategies, ways to manage, redirect, or keep safe the dog when it has an episode. So, um, for example, OCD. Very often, dogs will develop OCD in the form of repetitive and obsessive behaviors, such as chasing light reflections, chasing shadows, um, repeated pacing, tail chasing. A dog that repeatedly chases its tail and gets kind of obsessed with the process of chasing its tail and potentially is actually starting to harm itself either by grabbing the tail too hard or running into walls while spinning, or they can even blow out a knee if they always spin the same direction trying to chase their tail. Um, uh, and then dogs with light chasing or shadow chasing, they will obsess. They will just stare at the last piece of ground or wall they saw a light reflection or a shadow, and they will just stare at it for minutes or hours. And they will whine and they will pant and they will salivate. I had a dog growing up who was a light chaser, an OCD light chaser, and she would harm herself. If there was a reflection that landed on the carpet we had a couple of, what are they called? Wind chimes outside the window. And if they caught the sun just right, they would occasionally send a reflection onto the carpet. Once we realized what was happening, we actually removed those. But at first, they would send a reflection onto the carpet, and that light spot on the carpet would move as the wind moved the wind chime. And our dog became so obsessed with that she would pounce on the spot in the carpet where the little dot was, and she would actually dig at the carpet and bite at the carpet until her mouth and her paws were bleeding, which is such a huge level of OCD, of obsession and self-harm that is, hard to imagine. It's hard to see unless you've lived it. It's hard to consider unless you've lived it. This is why I recommend that people do not play with their dogs with laser lights, because they can become very obsessed like this. This started out as us playing with her with laser lights, and we realized how obsessive she was beginning to become. So we got rid of the laser light, but then we had the reflection from the wind chime that would cause the reflections, and she'd become obsessed with that. So dogs can, with these mental health issues, can and will harm themselves or the people around them. Like I said, we found something very similar to schizophrenia in dogs, and this schizophrenia, it is actually sorry about that. My headphones keep turning off for some reason. I'm not sure why, but anyway, the version of what we think might be a version of schizophrenia that we see in dogs is called rage syndrome or sudden rage syndrome or Cocker rage. And this is a condition that is more common in some breeds than others, but can happen in any breed. And it is as far as we can tell, there's very little science that has been able to parse what exactly this condition is. But um, as far as we can tell, our best assumption is that this is a seizure disorder, where instead of convulsing like most seizures, this seizure happens in a part of the brain that governs perception and inhibition. And these dogs essentially start to hallucinate while they have a seizure. And they can hallucinate to the point where everything around them looks like a scary monster. And if anything moves, like if their person goes, "Hey, what's wrong, buddy?" they will attack the scary monster that they perceive until the seizure stops. And this is why a lot of dogs can suddenly sort of turn on a dime. You can hear stories about dogs that were so sweet, and then one day they just sort of snapped. Very often, very likely, those dogs that suddenly snapped were a sudden rage syndrome situation where they had their first ever seizure, or they had the first seizure that actually got bad enough that or happened at the right time that they caused damage. And with sudden rage syndrome, we can give them seizure medications that seems to help. It seems to make it so that the seizures happen less frequently and they don't last for as long, but they still happen, and as the dog gets older, they continue to happen. So training can do a lot for a lot of dogs. For example, training can help a dog with OCD that is obsessed with lights or obsessed with shadows. Um, they can help the owner sort of mitigate that, and they can help teach the dog how to redirect onto something more appropriate. However, there are other conditions like sudden rage syndrome where no matter how much training you put in, no matter how much medicine we put in, there's a time limit and there's a limit to how much we can do to help a dog like that. Um, Now, I'm not saying that every dog that bites ever is having a rage syndrome situation. No, there are lots of situations where dogs who have been provoked, dogs just there was a perfect storm of events. The kid grabbed the dog's tail and pulled, or the owner tried to take away the dog's favorite bone and didn't realize that the dog was resource guarding, or somebody hurt a dog and the dog, in their pain and panic, bites. I've seen, dogs who got hit by a car, who then the owner tried to pick them up to put them into their car to take them to the emergency vet, and they bit the owner because they were in pain and because they were scared. That happens all the time. But in these severe situations where dogs who were perfectly fine and perfectly normal and very sweet and cuddly and loving suddenly snap and they just don't stop attacking, that is what rage syndrome usually looks like. Now, you might notice that I said that one of the names for it was Cocker rage. That's because one of the very first breeds that we found it in was Cocker Spaniels. And Cocker Spaniels were prone to a couple of seizure disorders, including epilepsy. And then all of a sudden, sudden rage syndrome started showing up. And a lot of breeders, there's no test for it. There's no way to know for sure until you're dissecting the brain after the dog has passed away if they have sudden rage syndrome. So there's no test for it. There was no way for owners or breeders to figure out if their dog had this condition, and except for that breeders started to track okay, my female that I've been breeding, some of her puppies developed sudden rage syndrome. So I'm going to spay her and her sisters, and I'm going to try breeding these dogs instead and keeping track of which dogs develop seizure disorders, which dogs develop sudden rage syndrome. And it's become a lot less common in Cocker Spaniels. However, it has also been discovered in dogs like German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois and Rottweilers. And it can be discovered in any breed at any time. Sometimes it is genetic, and sometimes a dog can be the first in their line to develop it. And it can be very unpredictable when or if it will happen. Usually, dogs develop these develop symptoms of sudden rage right around 2 years old, between 1.5 and 3 years old, usually. But seizures can start at any time. And once they start, they slowly become more common as the dog ages. Now, I'm not telling you to be afraid of your dog. 99.9% of dogs in the world will not have sudden rage syndrome and will never have a seizure. But it is a good thing to keep in mind that dogs can have mental illnesses. They can have and they can have these conditions that make it hard to help with training, things that are medical and not necessarily behavioral. And that's part of what my job is to help you figure out, is your dog's problem behavior medical or behavioral? And if it's medical, I can give you some things to test for. I can tell you, okay, talk to your vet about A, B, and C, and see if we can find a test to figure out what exactly is going on. And if it's behavioral, figure out a way to first make sure that your dog is having the problem less frequently with management. And then, second, start training to get your dog to the point of being able to actually make progress and choose better behaviors. All right. So that was 2 topics. So sound sensitivity and canine mental health issues. And I think that's a pretty good stream. Please feel free to leave more comments or questions in the comments. Larkspur Lisa, it was wonderful to have you join me for today's session, today's live trainer talk with Mary. And I hope to see you at future ones. And thank you very much. I will use any comments or questions put in the comment section to help me figure out what I'm going to be talking about in future sessions. I hope you have a wonderful day, and make sure to love your dog today. Bye.